All right, welcome to the deep dive. You guys have sent in a ton of articles and research on a topic I'm sure a lot of you are thinking about,
Yeah.
gold.
Yeah.
Specifically, why you should even consider it as an investment right now in 2024. We've got discussions on gold as this safe haven asset. There's tons of analysis on market trends, and we've got a variety of different investment strategies.
Right.
So our mission in this deep dive is to really kind of like pull out the most important insights from all the stuff you guys sent us and give you, hopefully a clear understanding of gold's potential without, completely overwhelming you.
Yeah, it's really about focusing on the core arguments and information that we see coming through in all these materials that you sent, just to help you guys understand why this is such a big conversation right now.
Exactly. So let's dive right in. One of the biggest things that keeps coming up in what you guys are sending in is gold's role as a safe haven asset. I mean, this idea has been around for centuries. But like, what is it about gold that keeps giving it that reputation?
Well, it's really interesting to see how consistently your sources point to the intrinsic value of gold. I mean, unlike, paper money, which is obviously subject to a lot of factors like inflation and, government policies, gold is, a physical commodity.
Right.
And it's got a limited supply.
Right.
So you see throughout history, a lot of your articles point this out, during economic turmoil or when the markets take a hit, you see institutions turning to gold to protect their wealth.
Okay.
Because it kind of holds firm or even increases in value when other assets are declining. It's almost like a form of, financial insurance during those turbulent times.
Yeah, I see that. So like, yeah, when we see those headlines about the stock market crashing or like, tension rising around the world, that's when people look to gold for stability.
That's exactly right. And your materials actually provide a lot of great examples from history, past crises where the perceived safety and stability of gold became this huge driver for investment.
Okay.
And it's not just about economic logic. There's actually a psychological element to it as well.
Okay.
In times of uncertainty, people look for that tangible, something they can hold.
Right.
That has that historical precedent. Gold offers that in a way that intangible assets just, don't.
Well, it's a psychological thing too.
Right.
That's interesting. So what about, so we've had a lot of inflation the last few years. We all know that. Prices going up.
Right.
Several of the articles you guys sent talk about gold being a hedge against rising prices. What does that mean? How does that work?
Yeah, that's a huge point. It's a crucial point highlighted in almost all of the research that you sent. Gold is considered an inflation hedge because as the cost of living rises and the purchasing power of your, dollars, euros, whatever, erodes, the price of gold tends to move in the opposite direction.
Okay.
One of your articles actually specifically mentioned this period between 2022 and 2023. I mean, we saw some serious inflation globally, and guess what? Gold prices hit record highs.
Okay.
It really demonstrates that gold can be a store of value when other assets are getting hammered by those rising prices.
So it's not just about like surviving the bad times, but actually like, preserving your buying power over time.
That's exactly it. As things get more expensive, you want to make sure your money is still worth something. And that kind of leads into another key aspect highlighted in a lot of what you sent. The fact that gold is accepted pretty much everywhere.
Right, yeah.
It's got this, long-term store value that's recognized globally.
Right.
So unlike investments that might only work in certain markets or countries, gold is gold wherever you go. And I think it says a lot that central banks around the world, they hold a significant amount of gold in their reserves.
Okay.
It's a sign that they see it as a stable and important part of the global financial system.
That makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, that kind of sets the stage, like why gold is even in the conversation.
Right.
But let's get into 2024 specifically. A lot of these articles you sent us get into gold price trends, kind of give a market overview. What are the key things people should know about what's been happening with gold prices lately?
Well, it's been performing really well, that's for sure. Like we talked about, 2023 was a huge year. Gold went over $2,000 an ounce.
Wow.
But what's interesting is 2024 has kind of picked up where 2023 left off. It's been on this upward trend, and a lot of analysts are saying this could continue as the year goes on.
Okay, so what's driving these potential price increases?
Well, from what I'm seeing in all your materials, there are a few key factors. First, you got the whole global inflation thing.
Right.
It's still a big worry in a lot of economies, and like we talked about, that makes gold more attractive as a hedge.
Makes sense.
Secondly, you got central banks, right?
Mm-hmm.
What they do has a massive impact.
Right.
Now, normally when interest rates go up, gold can become less appealing because you're not earning any interest on it.
Okay.
But with all this inflation, it's not so clear how high those interest rates can go.
Right.
And that uncertainty itself can actually be good for gold prices.
Yeah, okay. So the central banks are kind of in this tough spot.
Exactly. And that tough spot they're in is actually adding to the whole gold as a safe haven thing, right?
Okay, yeah.
On top of that, you've got all the geopolitical risks out there, wars, trade tensions, general economic instability.
Yeah.
All that stuff makes investors nervous. And when investors get nervous, they tend to run to things that seem safe, like gold. It's like this flight to quality thing.
Okay. So you've got inflation, you've got central banks trying to figure things out, you've got all this global instability. It sounds like that's creating an environment where gold could really take off.
It really does. And some of the analysts you sent are actually putting numbers on it.
Okay, yeah, you mentioned that. So what are they saying? Like, how high could gold go?
Well, you've got some predictions in here suggesting that gold could hit $2,500 an ounce by the end of the year.
Wow, that's a big jump.
It is. Now, obviously, these are just forecasts. They're not guarantees.
Right.
But I think they reflect how people are feeling about gold right now.
Okay, so that's something to pay attention to. Now, let's talk about who should be investing in gold in 2024. A lot of people think of it as something for, like, big financial institutions.
Right.
But is that really true?
Not at all. I mean, sure, big institutions hold gold, but your research really emphasizes how relevant it is for individual investors.
Okay.
People like you who are trying to protect their wealth and maybe grow it.
Right.
If you're a long-term investor, you're more focused on preserving your capital over time.
Yeah.
And you want to protect yourself from potential economic shocks, gold can be a really smart addition to your portfolio.
Okay.
One of your articles talked about how people with different risk tolerances might approach gold differently.
Okay.
Like someone who's really conservative might see it as a way to keep things stable.
Right.
While someone who's a little more comfortable with risk might like it for the diversification it brings to their investments.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So is there any room for gold in the portfolio of somebody who's more short-term focused?
That's an interesting point. Some of your sources actually suggest that gold could be good for short-term traders too,
Okay.
because the price of gold fluctuates, right?
Right.
Those ups and downs can create opportunities for people who know what they're doing.
Okay.
But, and this is important, your research really cautions against jumping into that without a solid understanding of market analysis and a high tolerance for volatility.
Makes sense.
It's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, one more thing before we move on. You mentioned people in countries with high inflation,
Right.
where their currency isn't doing so well.
Mm-hmm.
Is gold something they should be looking at specifically?
Oh, absolutely. One of your articles actually focused specifically on international finance, and it was really clear on that point.
Okay.
For people in those situations, gold can be a lifeline.
Okay.
It protects their purchasing power when their local currency is rapidly losing value.
All right. That makes a lot of sense. Now, flipping it around, are there any situations where your research suggests maybe avoiding gold in 2024?
Yeah, actually. It's not the right fit for everyone. Your materials highlight that. For example, if you're someone who's really focused on getting huge returns quickly, gold probably isn't the best choice.
Right.
Because it tends to be less volatile compared to things like growth stocks or investments in, developing economies.
Right.
It's more about steady, long-term value.
Makes sense. What about physical gold?
Mm-hmm.
If you're buying the actual bars or coins.
Yeah, that's another consideration. A lot of your sources, particularly the practical investment guides, they really emphasize the importance of secure storage and insurance for physical gold.
Right.
And that can be a turnoff for some people because it adds costs and it can be a logistical hassle.
Okay, yeah, that's fair. So let's say someone's listening and they think, oh, gold seems like a good idea for me.
Mm-hmm.
What are the main ways to invest in it? Like, what options do they have?
Well, you sent in research that outlines several key methods, and they all have their pros and cons. The most traditional way, the one you see in a lot of movies, is buying physical gold,
Okay.
like bullion bars or coins.
Right.
This tends to be popular with people who are in it for the long haul.
Okay.
They like the idea of actually owning this tangible asset.
Yeah.
But like we said before, you got to think about storage and insurance.
Right.
Now, as for where to get it, your guides mention banks, reputable jewelers, and online bullion dealers as places to start.
Okay, so that's physical gold. What if you don't want to deal with actually holding it?
Yeah, so for that, you've got gold ETFs, or gold exchange traded funds.
Okay.
They're basically investment funds that track the price of gold. You can buy and sell them on stock exchanges just like stocks.
What?
And they're really easy to trade. Plus, you don't have to worry about storing or insuring actual gold bars.
Right.
Now, some of your sources do point out that they can be influenced by what's happening in the stock market overall.
Okay, so there's some connection there.
Yeah, a little bit. Now, another option that's been getting more attention lately is digital gold platforms.
Okay, yeah, I've seen some stuff on those.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. You can buy and sell small amounts of gold online. Okay. And they often have digital wallets, so it's super convenient.
That sounds really easy.
It is. But, as always, you got to do your research, make sure the platform is legit, and look out for any hidden fees.
Right, so fees are something to look out for there.
Yeah. And then you have the more advanced options, like gold futures and options.
Right, yeah.
Those are basically contracts that let you bet on the future price of gold.
Okay.
Now, your sources are pretty clear that those are high risk, high reward.
Okay.
Definitely not for beginners.
Yeah, those sound pretty intense. So for someone just starting out, it sounds like physical gold or those gold ETFs are the way to go.
Yeah, I think that's a good starting point. Physical gold gives you that ownership, that you can touch it, it's there. While ETFs are super easy to trade. And then as you get more experience, you can explore those other options if you want to.
All right, so I've talked about the different ways to invest. Let's talk predictions. You mentioned some general forecasts earlier, but did those big financial institutions you mentioned, like Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, did they give any specific numbers on where they think gold is headed?
Yes, they did. And it's interesting because both of them seem to agree that if this high inflation sticks around, gold could reach somewhere between $2,400 and $2,500 an ounce.
Wow.
So, yeah, they're both pretty bullish on gold.
Okay, so what else are they watching? Like, what are the key things they're paying attention to that we should be aware of too?
Well, one thing they both highlight is the fact that central banks around the world are still buying a lot of gold.
Okay.
And that's not slowing down. Some are actually buying even more.
Okay.
That continued demand from these big players, it really strengthens the idea that gold is a solid long-term asset, and it can definitely push those prices up.
Okay, yeah, I see that. Now, did they talk about what might happen if the stock market, if we see a major crash or something like that?
Yeah, actually, that came up in a few of your sources. They suggested that if the stock market takes a big hit, gold prices could absolutely skyrocket. Because when things get really bad, people panic and they want to put their money somewhere safe.
Right.
And gold has that reputation.
So there's a lot of potential for things to really move.
There is. It's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, definitely. So based on everything we've talked about today, all this information you've pulled from the research you guys sent in, what advice would you give someone listening right now about how to approach gold in 2024?
Honestly, the most important thing is to figure out what your goals are and how much risk you're comfortable with.
Right.
Your sources really emphasize aligning your strategy with your own personal situation.
Okay, yeah.
So if you think inflation's going to stick around and things are going to stay shaky geopolitically, then buying gold and holding on to it for the long term could be a really smart move.
Okay.
Now, if you're more interested in trying to make a quick profit and you can handle the ups and downs of the market, then maybe you watch for dips in the price, buy low, sell high. But that takes a lot more active involvement. You got to be watching things closely.
Yeah, that's more of a trading approach.
Exactly. It all depends on your personality and what you're trying to achieve.
What if, inflation cools down? Like, what if things kind of settle down? Is gold still a good idea?
Even if things calm down, your sources are pretty consistent in saying that gold is still a valuable asset.
Okay.
It helps diversify your portfolio, and it protects you against all sorts of economic uncertainties.
Right.
It's not just about inflation, it's about having a safety net for whatever might come.
So even in a calmer environment, gold still has a place.
Exactly.
All right, so as we wrap up this deep dive into gold in 2024, what are the absolute key things you want people to take away from all this research?
Okay, I think the big ones are, first, gold has a proven track record as a way to hedge against inflation and protect your wealth when things get rough.
Okay.
Second, 2024 is shaping up to be a potentially huge year for gold. You've got analysts predicting prices around $2,500 an ounce.
Right.
And finally, there are a bunch of different ways to invest in gold, from actually holding it to ETFs to digital platforms. You got to find what works best for you based on your goals and how much risk you're comfortable with.
That's a great summary.
Yeah.
Really comprehensive. And it's all based on what you guys specifically sent us. So here's a final thought for you to consider as you go about your day.
Okay.
We've talked about inflation. We talked about all this geopolitical stuff and the potential for the market to get, really shaky. So given all that, how might adding some gold to your overall financial strategy, to manage your risk, how might that make sense for you? It's something to really think about.
Yeah.
This precious metal, it's got this long history, and things seem to be lining up in a way that can make it a really important part of protecting your financial future. Thanks for diving deep with us.
You got it.